The tide of anti-Semitism continues to rise in the United States, across the West, and around the globe. From a string of vicious assaults in Brooklyn on members of the Orthodox Jewish community.
Is there a bias crime outbreak in Brooklyn?
To the atrocity in Pittsburgh.
There has been a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh.
The worst anti-Semitic massacre in American history. To the attack on Passover worshipers at a synagogue in suburban San Diego. The resurgence of this ancient hatred has created a grim toll, with nearly 400 cases of violence recorded worldwide in 2018. In France, jihadists have struck again and again. An 85-year-old Holocaust survivor stabbed to death in her Parisian home. A rabbi and 3 children killed in a Jewish day school in Toulouse.
As terrorists gloated tonight over the Paris attacks.
4 Jews murdered at a kosher supermarket in Paris. Anti-Semitism has seen a resurgence in Europe and has spread across the ocean. Anti-Semitism online, along with incidents of anti-Semitic threats, vandalism, and desecrations, are increasing on both sides of the Atlantic. Anti-Israel protests in the US and abroad regularly devolve into anti-Semitic demonstrations, while socio-economic protests throughout Europe have spawned anti-Semitic vitriol. In the UK, the Labour Party is in upheaval after the party's leadership allowed anti-Jewish prejudice to go unchecked.
I cannot remain in a party that is institutionally anti-Semitic.
And even in the US Congress, accusations of anti-Semitism have been leveled at members of both sides of the aisle. AJC was the first to identify and call attention to the threat of rising anti-Semitism from 3 sources. On the far right, where extreme nationalist movements embrace anti-Semitic tropes from the fascist era. On the hard left, where anti-Semitism is often masked by criticism of Israel. And with Islamist extremists, especially in Western Europe, who often support the genocidal ambitions of Iran, ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas. AJC met hundreds of times with European leaders to wake them up to this growing threat. History has taught us that anti-Semitism flourishes when good people are silent. There's far too much at stake. We must fight back against this threat, here and now.
Please welcome AJC Europe Director Simone Rodan-Benzaquen.
Wow, it's difficult to speak about after this speech of Ron and after this video. Nevertheless, it is my honor to introduce to you our 3 distinguished guests today. I would like to call in John Mann, the member of the Labour Party, Member of Parliament, and the chair of the All-Parliamentary Group Against Anti-Semitism. Second, Michael O'Flaherty, the director of the European Union's Fundamental Rights Agency. And last but not least, Elan Carr, who is the US State Department's Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism. Gentlemen, I'm particularly eager to hear from you today on what has and can be done on anti-Semitism, on the combat against anti-Semitism. You heard from Ron earlier on the day after. As you could see in the video earlier on, AJC was indeed the first organization, and the first Jewish organization, but even organization to really alert European governments that anti-Semitism was back, that it was rearing its ugly head again, at a time when honestly most European government leaders wanted to hide theirs in the sand, when most people would say that what we as Jews in Europe were experiencing was in fact not anti-Semitism, but hooliganism or criminality. Now, I think today we find ourselves with a certain paradox that fast forward nearly 2 decades, most government leaders, most politicians in Europe understand that there's a problem of anti-Semitism. You have speeches from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, from Angela Merkel, from Prime Minister Theresa May, clearly condemning anti-Semitism. But on the other hand, as we could see in the video, as we heard from Ron, the reality has not gotten better. Maybe to some extent one could say that it's gotten worse. How do you explain that paradox? And also looking towards the future, sort of maybe just as an introduction, what can be done? If I maybe start with you, Michael, easy question.
Yeah, well, the first thing, we do need the hard evidence to back up these statements that things are very bad and getting worse, and they are very bad and getting worse. We've established that through the largest ever survey of its kind ever carried out on the incidence of anti-Semitism across Europe. What we also see is that it's quite different from country to country in the EU member states. But turning to what can be done, look, we've got great rhetoric. You've mentioned impressive speeches. We don't see the serious commitment to make anti-Semitism a top priority at the national level in enough places. And what does that mean in practice? It means being tough on crime, prosecuting crime against Jews, prosecuting hate crime. It means supporting victims. Jews don't report the incidents because they don't have confidence that they're going to be treated with respect.
What's the percentage that you evaluate in terms of reporting?
It's very low. About 80% of incidents are not reported.
80?
80. This means that the official figures entirely understate the situation. People are afraid to go, as one person said to me, why report anti-Semitism to an anti-Semite? So there's a tremendous business of building up confidence and trust in the security and the police forces. But when the reporting is made, we don't see enough serious investigation and prosecution. The cases aren't arriving in court. People can get away with it. We need to invest more in providing basic safety. It's outrageous that in some European countries, the state charges the Jewish community for enhanced security. That's not acceptable. It's a basic right in any society to be kept safe. Finally, we have to invest in education and awareness raising. 70% of Europeans told the European Union recently in a survey that they don't know enough about Judaism. And that's from the non-Jewish community, saying it wants to know more. We have to reinvest in education and awareness raising, and teaching about the Holocaust. All of this has to be brought back to life again in a fresh, new way.
Thank you. John, can I... yes, of course. Absolutely. Can I maybe turn to you exactly on that question? You have been in that field of expertise for a very long time. What is it why is that paradox, first of all, and what is it that can be done?
Politicians need to act, not just talk. That's why there's a paradox. And I think what's needed, I'd use 2 words. The first is consequences. Every time there's an anti-Semite acting in any way, there need to be consequences for that person or for that organisation. If there are no consequences, then it will spread and it will deepen. And we've been very poor at creating consequences for people. So, for example, in my own political party, I raised the money for the legal action that's gone now to a full Human Rights Commission investigation into institutional anti-Semitism. We'll see what happens with that. But it gives a clear message. If you fail to act, there will be consequences. Secondly, consistency. We're very bad at spreading good practice, and we're very shy at calling out bad practice, often lack of action. And part of the consistency, and one of the things we've got that can assist us greatly now, is having an international definition of anti-Semitism, the IRA definition. That needs to be adopted in all countries.
We'll get back to that.
But also in all civil society organisations, for example, such as the universities. So consequences and consistency.
Thank you. Elan, again.
Allow me
Sure.
first to take license. Simone, thank you. And I want to thank my colleagues, Michael and John. And I really have to say, the AJC has been a game changer in the area of, first of all, in Jewish life generally, but specifically in the fight against anti-Semitism. The impact that the AJC has made cannot be overstated. And I want to thank this organization that does so much. You mentioned the IRA definition, John. Wouldn't have happened without the intervention of all of you leaders. David Harris, you're a wizard, and I also want to compliment and say Mazal Tov and B'atzlacha to Harriet. We're very excited about that. And so thank you for all that you do. Now, about your question, it's not so much a paradox, Simone, because in fact it's causal. The rise in anti-Semitism, which is so open and notorious, has forced leaders to take stock of this and to say, how can this be happening? How is this possible? Especially in Europe, we have European leaders who are saying, here of all places, it hasn't been that long. We're about to commemorate 75 years of the end of the Holocaust when the crematoria stopped operating, and already. And so there is a disgust and mortification that this is happening. And so I actually think it's highly encouraging that you have leaders not only at the head of government, head of state level, but all the way down. I've been now in Europe multiple times in my official capacity. I just got back a week and a half ago. And there are leaders at all levels of government who are saying this cannot happen. And they also understand, Simone, that anti-Semitism and the fight against anti-Semitism isn't merely a favor to the Jewish people. That the fight against anti-Semitism is a fight for the future of the countries and the continent they want their kids to inherit. They get it, they're saying it, and I think that's great. Now, why do we not see an immediate change in the situation? Well, first of all, it takes time. And second of all, Michael's right. There isn't enough follow-through. Declarations are very important, that's the beginning, but there has to be follow-through. And I want to suggest that this has to be done in two areas. First of all, the manifestations of anti-Semitism. You've got to attack the actions. Provide security for the communities and make not only Jews feel safe on the street, which is a basic feature of quality of life, but more than feel safe, feel wanted, feel embraced. We talk about tolerance. We want Jews to be respected and embraced, not just tolerated. And so the manifestations on one side, and then, but at its base, anti-Semitism is an attitude, it's a worldview, it's a hatred, and that has to be changed, has to be attacked at its roots, and that starts with elementary school, and it starts with uniform, unequivocal condemnation of anti-Semitic action. And that's what we have to do. We have to see unequivocal, unvarnished condemnation whenever anti-Semitic statements are made, and that's critical.
Can I actually just follow up on this? Thank you. Can I just follow up actually on this, because I would like to speak a little bit about your specific role. First of all, it's a role that AJC has advocated for a long time, so we're very happy that you're here today. But what is it that you can do in your role, more than just sort of moral suasion? What is it that you have you laid out a strategy, and can you maybe explain to us sort of what is it that you very concretely can do in your role as Special Envoy?
Certainly. So the strategy is to look at several categories of anti-Semitism. One thing is that's critical is textbooks. if there is an organized institutional indoctrination of anti-Semitic hatred in kids, that is something that we have to combat and end immediately. Because once you do that, it becomes, I'm not going to say impossible, but it becomes almost impossible to undo the damage. This is something we see a great deal in the Middle East. And I'm not talking about Iran. I'm talking about even our allies that are indoctrinating kids in anti-Semitic
Can you give us examples?
Well, there are textbooks in the Middle East, in countries. I don't want to start naming countries, but there are textbooks in countries, including our allies, that are appalling. And that is something that's got to stop. Because again, it's very important to remember, what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East. What happens in the Middle East directly affects the European street and the American college campus. And so the Middle East is a focus, and anti-Semitism emanating from that part of the world has implications internationally, globally. And so textbooks are a key issue. Second of all, thanks to wonderful surveys like Michael's, like the FRA survey, that measures with rigor, with methodological rigor, how Jews are feeling. And those numbers are staggering. 90%, like we said, 90% of the Jews in most European countries believe that anti-Semitism is a problem and that it's rising, and a substantial percentage of those are contemplating leaving, literally contemplating leaving their countries because of it. So we have data, we have surveys. Our strategy is we want to see those numbers go down. So right away, we want to see, through the provision of safety and security, a robust infrastructure of it, we want to see those numbers change dramatically, where Jews are feeling safe, where they feel they can express themselves Jewishly, and where they don't, again, if you can't leave your house and feel like you're going to come back in one piece, or put your kids on a school bus and know that they're safe, you cannot have quality of life. And so that is number two, is to see those numbers move. And then finally, number three is to use the diplomatic pressure of the United States. And again, that's my role. I'm the diplomatic representative of our country on this issue. To use the diplomatic power of the United States to have our allies act in concert, to focus on this, and to do what it takes to bring that down. I can tell you that I just had bilateral meetings with 3 countries. I met with senior officials of these governments. For every country, I had a game plan and a list of asks. Every country is different. The problems are different in every country. I was in Eastern Europe, Eastern and Central Europe, very different from Western Europe. But for each country, it's, you're doing a lot of things very well, and here's what you're doing well. However, let's talk about A, B, C, D. What can we do about this? And I'm happy to report that both because everybody realizes that anti-Semitism is a problem today, and because the United States is respected in the world and has clout in the world. For both those reasons, when I meet with our counterparts, the response I get is, okay, we understand you care about this, and we understand not only that you care, but your boss and his boss cares about this, and so let's see if we can make this happen. And I couldn't be more pleased by the response I've gotten. Already one country complied with a specific request I made. They dropped a piece of legislation. So it wasn't a small ask. It was a piece of legislation that was about to be introduced. The country dropped that piece of legislation. That was one of the things I requested. And so we're getting work done. We have a lot to do, but I'm actually optimistic. And if I weren't optimistic about our chances to improve this, I wouldn't have taken the job.
Thank you. Thanks, and thank you for your work. You mentioned, John, earlier on the IRA working definition. This is, of course, now very important. It's the European Council, the European Parliament, the State Department, as well as 40 national governments have adopted the IRA working definition, which is basically, for those of you who don't know, it's a sort of a guideline of allowing to define anti-Semitism in all of its forms, including when legitimate criticism crosses the border and becomes, let's call it anti-Zionist anti-Semitism. Can you speak a little bit to us about why the working definition is useful, and more broadly, how do you think this new form of anti-Semitism, the anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, if we want to call it that way, can actually be combated?
Well, this is a critical way to combat it, because if you spend your time in an argument over what is anti-Semitic, what isn't, then that's where all the efforts go. Whereas what we are doing now, because there is an agreed definition, is we're then able to call out the anti-Semitism, rather than argue about is it anti-Semitism, and then create consequences for the anti-Semites. And whether those consequences are legalistic, through criminal law, through civil law, whether their re-education is important, but without a definition, then what we found was, particularly dealing with left anti-Semitism, is that we went round in a circle of arguing what is anti-Semitism and what isn't. And the critical place we're taking it now is into the political parties, into the universities, into civil society. The best example for us is the world of sport, where as we get this definition adopted there, it gives them the tools to actually take their own action, and it gives us the ability to hold them to account if they fail to do so. It's absolutely vital, and it's absolutely vital it spreads far further into far more countries, and then deeply into civic society, and doesn't just lie there as something that politicians can tick the box and say, yeah, we've agreed that. That's nowhere near good enough, and it misses the point. You use the term accurately, working definition. Working definition means it has to be put to work, and the best example so far in the world, the best practice in my view, without question, is the way the police force in the United Kingdom uses it as a working definition of what is a hate crime and what should be done about hate crime. That's precise, it's tangible, it brings law enforcement into play. We're able then to use that when people haven't crossed the criminal threshold, but have still done things that are dangerous, that are damaging, that are anti-Semitic.
Thank you. Michael, I just want to give you the opportunity to, because there has been some controversy, not everybody knows this, about the working definition and the FRA, the Fundamental Rights Agency, because at some point the Fundamental Rights Agency took it off their website, and so the question was whether the Fundamental Rights Agency actually supports the working definition. Would you be able to say a few words about that?
Sure, I can be very straightforward. I agree completely with John. The working definition is a very valuable tool. I'm delighted that the European Union has adopted it and that it's being adopted across the EU member states. We will work with it, so we have no problem, no issue whatsoever today with this definition. You did, in your earlier question to John, though, you asked, in applying the working definition, how do you distinguish between speech that has to be tolerated and speech and actions that cross a line? And there I think it's important to frame the application of the definition in human rights law and practice. Anti-Semitism is a violation of human rights. And so we should bring to bear the human rights commitments, human rights treaties, the United Nations in helping us to negotiate here. We need to get the United Nations to become far more engaged in combating anti-Semitism. And by the way, You've mentioned the important work of the AJC and getting things on the agenda. I'd mentioned the work of the Jacob Blaustein Institute, which has done so much in strengthening the capacity of the UN to respond to human rights abuses.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I cannot believe it, but I'm watching the screen. Time is up. If I can just maybe, in a few words, ask you to say a few words of sort of looking towards the future. How optimistic or pessimistic are you about our capacity, our collective capacity to combat anti-Semitism, and what gives you hope? So,
like I said before, I'm optimistic. I think we can make real gains in this area. things are bad, no question about it, but there is widespread appreciation that this has to change. What can we do about it? I'll tell you, I think one of the most important things that we can do in this room is unite. The Jewish community has to be united and cannot fight over what is or is not anti-Semitism. I will tell you that the fastest growing kind of anti-Semitism today is the anti-Semitism that clothes itself in the language of Israel hatred and anti-Zionism. And we've got to appreciate that. We've got to fight it. The German Bundestag just voted that BDS is anti-Semitism. And not only anti-Semitism, but they said, that's right, but they said it reminds them of the Juden boycott of the Nazi era. That's what they said. That's the Bundestag. We've got to unite around that, and we have to say we are going to fight anti-Zionism everywhere it rears its ugly head. BDS is anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. We've got to move forward together and oppose it, or else this is going to inundate our college campuses and the European street and circles of intelligence.
Thank you very much. Michael, few words. Thank you.
I'm not as optimistic. It's getting worse. We have a long way to go, but we've no choice. And it's not just a struggle for Jewish community. It's a struggle for the whole of our societies. Combating anti-Semitism is a test of our civilizations. If we fail it, our civilizations have failed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. John.
The situation's far worse than it was, and not just in my country. The death threats I get, my family gets, come from the left, they come from the right, they come from the Islamists, and there are plenty of people get far worse than me. I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic. I'm realistic. And that's why I like the AJC. The AJC internationally is our best partner for my organisation. And the reason for that is the AJC has always been the most honest organisation that I've seen. Honest about how bad the problem is, but never overstating any example. Honest is critical, and I suppose I tinge to optimism because when I look around the room, I don't see 2,500 delegates. I see 2,500 leaders. And what we need are more leaders stepping up to the mark, tangibly spreading best practice. And I come back to what I said at the beginning. Let us create consequences for every anti-Semite, whether it's at the lowest level of somebody who simply ignores a university student because they're Jewish. No more than that. There should be consequences for that person, to the terrorists and the murderers at every level.
Thank you.
Let us work together to get
Hear, hear, as they say. I would like to thank that panel. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm so sorry I cannot be with you in person today at the AJC Global Forum. But as a member of both the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Homeland Security Committee, I am deeply involved in ensuring the American-Israeli relationship remains strong. And I am proud to stand strongly with America's most important allies. So let me be clear about what I believe. Israel is a critical friend and ally to the United States. I stand with Israel both because of our shared values, which are so fundamental to the founding of both our nations, and I believe the bonds between the people of the United States and the people of Israel are unbreakable, and we can never let anyone drive a wedge between us. And I believe Israel should never be a partisan issue. I will do everything in my power to ensure broad and bipartisan support for Israel's security and right to self-defense. That is why I strongly support America's security assistance to Israel, and I am committed to strengthen the American-Israeli security and defense relationship. I believe that the only viable resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the only way Israel can remain a Jewish and democratic state is two states for two peoples living side by side. Palestinians should be able to govern themselves in their own state in peace and dignity, just as Israelis deserve a secure homeland for the Jewish people. I believe that a resolution to this conflict cannot be imposed by outside parties. It must be agreed upon by the parties themselves. Both sides will have to make difficult decisions. Peace can only come through a reconciliation of differences, and that can only happen at the negotiating table. I believe that when any organization delegitimizes Israel, we must stand up and speak out against it. Israel must be treated equally, and that is why the first resolution I co-sponsored as a United States Senator was to combat anti-Israeli bias at the United Nations and affirm and reaffirm that the United States seeks a just, secure, and sustainable two-state solution. As the senator who represents Poway, and as someone who's personally prosecuted hate crimes, I also believe that we need to speak the truth, that anti-Semitism is real in this country. We cannot stand by while anti-Semitism, hate crimes, and bigotry are on the rise. This violence and hate are alarming and simply unacceptable. No one should have to worry about their children's safety when they drop them off at the JCC. We all need to join together to stand up and speak out against it. And I will leave you with this. You have my promise that as I fight to promote human rights and security, Israel and the Jewish community will always be a priority for me.
Please welcome AJC delegates, society members Susan Feinberg Green and Bill Green.
Good morning. My name is Bill Green. Next to me is my wife, Susan Feinberg Green. After my first wife, Sharon's untimely death, my family established an award in her memory to recognize young people who endeavor to make the world a better place, as Sharon did during her lifetime. Last year, AJC began presenting the Sharon Green Award to campus advocates in honor of my late wife, and we are glad to be here today to once again present the award, and that we are also joined in the audience by Sharon's and my son, Josh, his wife, Amy, and their sons, Wes and Teddy. The Sharon Green Award recognizes college students who take it upon themselves to combat anti-Semitism, advocate against the divisive BDS movement, and promote a positive image of Israel. While it is painfully sad that too many students must, in fact, engage in this type of work, we are honored to present the 2019 Sharon Green Award to student activists here with us today from our SGA at New York University and UEJF, the French Union of Jewish Students. And in the face of political attacks, sometimes physical attacks, these student leaders are shining examples of everything that is right on our campuses today. Both our SGA and UEJF have gone above and beyond, working tirelessly over the past year to increase safety, fairness, and accessibility for Jewish students on their campuses, from Washington Square Park to the length and breadth of France. These two outstanding student groups have changed the conversation about Jewish life on campus and led the charge for change in the face of intimidation, ostracism, and even violence. These students are nothing short of remarkable. Now please turn your attention to the screens behind us to honor the students at UEJF and our SGA who lead the way for a more open and respectful campus climate for all students.
It's important to note that there's no senators representing the Jewish community at large. We do not have a voice, let alone a vote.
Today, NYU student government passed the BDS resolution. We were only given 12 minutes to speak as the opposition, while the other side had over 45.
Just happening at NYU. In campuses throughout New York and the United States, students are being targeted just because they support Israel.
Please join us in welcoming Adela Kohab and Sasha Gorzan. Adela. Thank you for being defenders of the Jewish cause on university campuses. Your work inspires us. And we look forward to seeing all the incredible things you and your friends will continue to do in the years ahead. Congratulations.
Merci d'être les défenseurs de la cause juive sur les campus universitaires. Votre travail nous inspire et nous avons hâte de voir toutes les choses incroyables que vous allez continuer à faire dans les années à venir. Félicitations et chapeau.
We are extremely honored to accept the Sharon Green Award for Campus Advocacy on behalf of NYU's Jewish community for the RSGA, or Our Student Government Assembly movement. We want to personally thank the Green family for their continued support and generosity that encourages students to continue their resolute advocacy on campus and beyond every day. Over the last 2 years, NYU's Jewish community has faced ongoing harassment, from physical assault to attacks on social media to flag burning to 2 anti-Israel resolutions on student government, a student government where Jewish students were not allowed proper representation. The RSGA movement was designed to restore NYU's commitment to diversity and inclusion, especially for the Jewish community and other communities that were not represented, by advocating for our democratic process, standing up for the democratic process, and making sure that our voices were heard. I'm extremely proud to say that today, after the RSGA campaign, we don't have just 1, but 4 students that represent the Jewish community at NYU and will continue to advocate on behalf of the community and others who were voiceless because of the lack of democracy. There's nothing more daunting than standing at the forefront of a battle that you believe has already been lost. And as a student on campus, there's nothing more valuable than knowing we have access to the robust network of support that AJC provides. On behalf of NYU's Jewish community and the RSGA movement, I'd like to thank AJC for their support of student-led efforts and not only validating but celebrating all of the work that we do. Thank you for celebrating our empowered agency and helping us stand strong on campus. Thank you again to the Green family for their generosity and to AJC for this tremendous honor.
It's a great honor to receive this award on the behalf of the 15,000 French Jewish students that we gather. It is so meaningful to receive strong support from AJC, who does such an amazing work. In the past years, we have witnessed the rise of antisemitism in France. Our offices were vandalized in La Sorbonne, and we've been assaulted a month ago at Marine Le Pen's Congress. But we are proud Jews, proud Zionists, and proud support of Israel. We will keep fighting for democracy and Jewish values to make our world a better place for today and tomorrow. On the campuses, we have trained a new generation of Jewish leaders who shape our future. We fight the BDS movement so hard that in France, not a single BDS resolution has passed on the campuses. We battle hard against hate speech on the internet and social media, and we made Twitter convicted by French justice. Thanks to this judgment, they had to create a reporting platform worldwide for hate speech. Hate speech legitimates anti-Semitic killings all across the world, and I would like to pay tribute here to the victims of anti-Semitic killings in Pittsburgh and San Diego. Tackling hate speech online. It's not about the First Amendment, it's about taking responsibility. And I know that you have the power and you will make a real and virtual world a safer place for all citizens. Together, we are stronger, and this is just the beginning. Thank you, AJC.
I am clearly second-generation AJC because from my teenage years, my parents were actively involved nationally. And it just became a part of our family's Jewish volunteer lives. And I was always invited to come and observe. And then later on in my 20s, when I was able to come on my own, I had the opportunity to see it from a more independent perspective. But watching how much AJC enriched their lives, both in terms of exposure, education, enrichment, it just seemed natural for me to want to follow in their footsteps and to try to continue to stay involved with the agency. To a certain extent, I have AJC in my DNA. I grew up in a community where Jews are a significant minority, but I almost never experienced anti-Semitism growing up, almost never. So I was confident that my children would grow up in a world where they would not experience it and where we wouldn't see it on a broader national front. Well, that's no longer the case. As Jews, we know what our moral compass is or is supposed to be. We know the values that our parents and grandparents helped instill in us. As Jews, we have an obligation to go out and try to repair and fix the world where we can. I can't imagine anybody being a parent not wanting to create for their children a world that is a little more fixed and a little more value-driven than the world that we might have had. Living an open, proud Jewish existence in America has been one of the great enhancements to my personal life. And as a parent, I almost want nothing more for my children beyond good health and personal happiness than for them to have the opportunity to proudly and openly live as Jews in this country. And I'm just hopeful, as their father and as one who cares for them and wants the best for them, that they'll be able to take advantage of that opportunity, that there will be an AJC there for them to be able to enrich their lives the way that it has helped enrich mine.
Please welcome AJC Executive Council Member Bobby Lapin.
Good morning. All right, you've just had a chance to hear a little bit about why AJC has long been an important part of my life and central to my family's Jewish story. As advocates, however, we all have the power to help the Jewish people. By being here today, by attending this AJC Global Forum, by standing together as one, each of us has made the world a little bit better and the future a little bit brighter. But candidly, there is another way that each of us can tangibly do something extra to do our part. We can support AJC financially. Together, let's ensure that AJC has the resources that it needs to combat anti-Semitism, to stand up for Israel, and to protect democratic values. At this precarious time for our people and for our world, let's all together invest in the work of AJC. This morning, I am more than pleased to announce that a very generous individual has offered AJC a $500,000 challenge matching grant. This member, absolutely, please. This committed and generous member of our community has given each of us an opportunity to leverage our own support. Through the end of this global forum, any new or increased gift to AJC's 2019 general campaign will be matched 2 for 1. I want to say that again, 2 for 1, up to the $500,000. So how can you do this? To have your gift matched, you can complete the pledge card on the back of your Global Forum program, or you can pick up a pledge card outside the ballroom following our session this morning, and you can give that pledge card to any AJC staffer. You can visit www.ajc.org/give@glofo and visit the donate page on that particular portion of the website. And you can speak, of course, to your local AJC regional director or any AJC staffer about making your gift. As I said in the video that we all just watched, we have an obligation on our watch to repair the world in which we live. For me and for, I'm sure, so many of you, AJC is the most effective vehicle, and for me, the most eloquent voice for doing so. So I hope that you will join Eve and me in taking advantage of this unique opportunity. It's once in a lifetime, once in a global forum, and we can make it a complete success. Thank you very much.
Please welcome AJC President John Shapiro.
Well, let me thank first Bobby and whoever made the grant or the challenge, and I hope everybody steps up. I had a person with a powder puff there, so I hope I look less shiny. Have to take advantage of these moments. Good morning. As president, I've been honored to introduce some of the world leaders who join us at the AJC Global Forum. Last year, at our first ever Global Forum in Jerusalem, I had the privilege of welcoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address our audience. As we've seen in the news, and we'll hear more about in today's program, the Prime Minister is a bit busy these days, and understandably, he is unable to join us in Washington. However, he did want to speak to the AJC about the pressing issues of the moment and those issues that relate to Israel and the Jewish people. Therefore, a few weeks ago, in the midst of his difficult, as it turns out, extremely difficult negotiations to assemble a governing coalition, the Prime Minister invited David Harris, our CEO, to come to Jerusalem and record an interview with him exclusively focused on AJC priorities and activities. What you're about to see is a glimpse of a much longer, in-depth conversation, the text of which you received in your AJC tote bags. The full audio will also be made available online. We remain grateful to the Prime Minister for his steadfast leadership of Israel and for his long-standing relationship and friendship with AJC. Without further ado, please direct your attention to the screens behind me.
The first question is, how would you describe the state of U.S.-Israel relations at the moment?
I think they're extraordinary because the United States has backed Israel through difficult times and also through our successes. We've recently had President Trump recognized Israel's sovereignty on the Golan Heights, as well as recognizes Jerusalem as our capital, something that is in a very broad consensus in Israel, as well as moving the American embassy here, as well as increasing the pressures on Iran, which not only Israelis, but many of our Arab neighbors believe is a source of aggression, terror, and instability in this region. So on the whole, I would say that's very good.
And do you think that that consensus you're talking about can also be found today on the Iran issue in Washington?
It wasn't found there before, in the sense that there was a majority, as you remember, against the agreement. And I didn't hide the fact that I disagreed with the idea of giving Iran those terms under the Iran agreement, nuclear agreement, which gave them an enormous amount of money with the express assumption that they would somehow moderate their behavior. The opposite happened. They're just enveloping the Middle East in tentacles of aggression. I had differences with President Obama, but at the same time I also didn't prevent the two of us from signing a memorandum of agreement that enabled Israel to get very generous American military assistance over the coming decade. And I'm very appreciative of that. So there are things that we agree on, there are things that we don't agree on. This is a very dangerous regime, and it should be pressured, sanctions, so it stops its unbelievable aggression in the region. And on this, by the way, Arabs and Israelis agree. And I would say, just as a general word of advice, when Arabs and Israelis agree, it's worth paying attention to. We must know something, and we do.
And without trying to guess at the details of the deal of the century, what are some of the essential elements for Israel of any enduring peace agreement with the Palestinians?
Well, I had one chief thing that I put forward to our American friends, as I did to all administrations. Israel has to be in charge of security in all the area west of the Jordan. All the area west of the Jordan is tiny. It's about 40 miles at its widest point, maybe 50 miles. We cannot have anyone but Israel be in charge of security, because we've seen what happens. Immediately, if we leave, militant Islamic terrorists come in. And they could be Daesh terrorists, and they could be Hamas terrorists. That's what happened in Gaza. We left, Hamas came in. We left Lebanon, Hezbollah came in, both supported by Iran. We can't have that happen in the center of the country, in Judea, Samaria. That will spell an end to Israel. Israel will have to have the overriding security responsibility, both for our sake, the security of Israel, but paradoxically also the security of the Palestinians. Because if we don't maintain that responsibility, the Palestinian Authority will be overthrown in 2 seconds by militant Islam. That is the main issue.
And shifting gears for a moment, Mr. Prime Minister, on the issue of Israel-diaspora relations, some in the diaspora are concerned that it's becoming less important as a priority issue for Israel. What do you say to the diaspora and to American Jewry in particular?
Well, not for me. That I can tell you, guaranteed. Because I think that our whole purpose is to be a home for all the Jews who want to see Israel as their home. And that obviously doesn't mean that Israel is run exactly the way the United States is run. It's not. But it should be connected to the Jewish people around the world. It should be a place where they can come and live if they so choose. It should be a place that welcomes them in any case, because we have a great common history and a common destiny in many ways. The more we can keep this bond, the better it is both for Israel and diaspora Jews.
And to the issue of rising anti-Semitism around the world, what's Israel's role in response?
The founders of modern Zionism didn't think that anti-Semitism would necessarily disappear. Some of them did. They said it's not that the attacks would disappear once you have a Jewish state. It's that you'd have the means to defend yourself against these attacks once you have the Jewish state. We built a state, we built an army, a very strong army. We built a resilience in our capability. Even though we were outnumbered, outgunned, and so on, we were able to defeat our enemies and to build this thriving modern state. But it doesn't mean that you can stop the anti-Semitic attacks worldwide. It means you have to fight that too. You have to fight it in America. It's there. We can see it. Unfortunately, it's taken some tragic toll recently in the 2 attacks on the 2 synagogues in the United States. It's in Europe, it's in Western Europe, it's obviously in other parts in the Middle East and so on. I think the way to deal with anti-Semitism is to fight it. Will you eradicate it? No. But we haven't eradicated anti-Semitism in the Middle East, but we're here, thriving, growing. That's something that we have to do for Jews worldwide.
And lastly, you know AJC well. We've known each other for 30 years or more. As global advocates, what are the new frontiers for AJC, and where can we be of help?
I think we have an extraordinary opportunity. We have great challenges, but we also have great successes. The big success that we have is in Israel's expanding diplomatic horizons. Israel is branching out to the world. First of all, I want to congratulate the AJC for the work that you did, making a lot of connections that we needed when we didn't have the kind of open channels that we have today. But I think we can continue to expand to the rest of the world. I think some important Muslim states such as Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan are already in that.
We are frequent flyers on Azerbaijan Airlines.
So you know, while you may have been the pioneers in creating that, you know right now that this is a well-trodden path. Okay, well, I think the same is going to happen with other countries, and I think you can and should be a part of this.
Please welcome AJC Jerusalem Chair Marvin Israelo.
Good morning. While the twists and turns we see every day in American politics have captivated all of us, America isn't alone in its turbulence. As you know, 5 days ago, 7 weeks after a hard-fought national election and failed attempts to assemble a coalition, the Knesset voted to dissolve the Israeli government and call for a new election in September. So here we are, in a discussion that was intended to be a post-Israeli election analysis, and now will be instead, in essence, an Israeli pre-election analysis. Of course, the questions aren't all that different. What's the chance that September's results will be any more conclusive than April's? What are the issues that are so intractable, so resistant to compromise, that Israelis need to go to the polls twice in 5 months to address them? What should we expect regarding next steps in the peace process? And will U.S. plans to advance the process now be put on hold? And what of Israel's other challenges in the region, particularly the continuing threat posed by Iran? Fortunately, I have the privilege of introducing us to a panel of distinguished experts who will help us to answer these questions. Attila Somfalvi is the senior political commentator and chief anchor for Ynet, the online presence of Israel's most read newspaper. Tal Schneider is a diplomatic and political correspondent for Globe's newspaper, Israel's premier business publication. And Irit Linor is a novelist, screenwriter, and radio host for GLZ Radio Israel's nationwide radio network operated by the IDF. Joining them to moderate their discussion will be Yoav Limor, Senior Defense Correspondent for Yisrael Hayom. Please join me in giving them a very warm welcome.
Okay, good morning. Thanks for having us. I believe I speak on behalf of all of us. Before we start, since we have a very short time, a short story telling of a young gentleman entering a speech like this, starting by apologizing for having an ugly cut on his face, saying that the same morning he was shaving and he was cutting his face because he was thinking of his speech. An elder gentleman stands up from the crowd saying to him, "Young gentleman, instead of thinking of your speech and cutting your face, you should have thought of your face and cut your speech." So, ladies and gentlemen, think of the consequences and keep it short. We have very little time. As mentioned, Israel is post- and pre-election campaign. Why the hell are we going to vote again in September, Attila?
It's like a test. We didn't pass the first one, so we have to try again. Maybe this time we'll be more clear about what we want in Israel. It's pretty clear that as strong as Netanyahu, Mr. Netanyahu is, the prime minister is, the weaker he is. Because as we saw, he has problems with the law. So his problems with the law became a national problem lately, and all the political scene is evolving around this. So this is, for a fact, a problem that made us come for the first time in our history, in our political history, to a situation in which Israel is going twice in a year to the polls. You saw the small parties with 4 or 5 seats in the Knesset being able to extort Netanyahu to the end of new elections.
Tal?
Thank you for having me. I think Israel is going through a huge political turmoil at the moment. Events are unfolding every minute as we speak here, and I am covering this political bit, so it's really even hard to follow what's going on. It's just minute-by-minute changes, and I think that this political chaos is coming out from the Prime Minister personal problems. It's all in the mix with his party behavior and other party behavior, and you know, in this point of time, there is no way to foresee what's going to happen in September. It's really, really tough for us to cover this. So it's, you know,
so
the midst of the
our
chaos.
2 colleagues here say it's not about us, it's about him, it's about Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm.
Is it so?
I think maybe it's about the Israeli democracy. In some sense, democracy is turmoil, because otherwise we have dictatorship and we have stagnation, and I'm not sure this is a good alternative. Also, we have the Israeli democracy. I've checked. I may call it research, but I looked in Wikipedia. Ever since the State of Israel has begun, we never had less than 10 parties. So we had from the beginning some sorts of the Labour Party and several sorts of religious party, and we have the Communist Party ever since day one, actually. So I think maybe we should be surprised that something like that didn't happen before. Now, in Israel, the multi-partisan system, it is in itself some method of checks and balances. Because in order to make a coalition, you have to bargain, and you have to give a little, and you have to take a little, and you have to make some sorts of compromise. It's a healthy process.
But in the past, we were talking about ourselves, about war, about peace, about economy. Currently, everybody is talking about Netanyahu. Either you're in favor of him or you're against him. That's what the people voted.
Yes. There's a biological analogy. What's the difference genetically between a fruit fly and a human being? Some 5% of the genetic the gene pool is 90% identical between a fruit fly and a human being. Yes, but those 5% are major. I think there's not much difference between the big parties, blue and white, and the Likud. But you know, some people really don't like Netanyahu, and I cannot for the life of me understand why. I like him a lot.
Attila, you want to explain? A novelist or not, you understand what her new book is going to be about.
Well, before we talk about Mr. Netanyahu, which is an issue we don't deal with it enough in Israel, we had to come here and deal with it here. I think the most important thing, from my perspective, is to understand that Israeli politics are going through a huge change, and the change is we are leaving behind the dichotomic split between right and left, as we knew it from 1967, between those pro-Eretz Israel and those against Eretz Israel and pro-peace. And we are, for the first time after 71 years, we are dealing with the internal problems of the state of Israel. Meaning, there is a huge fight. There is a war out there between liberals in Israel and conservatives in Israel. And which makes Irit here a conservative, which makes Israel, with Netanyahu, and with his coalition going to Din Torah. Because this is what his counterparts in his next coalition promise us, Irit. A change, a dramatic change in how Israel will look like. And we have to face that. When you want to change the High Court, the Supreme Court, when you want to change how Israel deals with the law, when you want to make special laws for a prime minister that is dealing with legal problems, this is a different Israel than we knew
Attila,
for 71
you're jumping
years.
the gun with Din Torah. He's not Bezalel Smotrich, who's a member of Knesset. He's not in the government. He was mouthing off a bit.
But he will
I know that you're terribly scared that someone is going to force you to act a little bit more Jewish. This is not going to happen.
I'm not scared.
Relax.
I'm terrified. I'm not
Yoga, chakra. Relax, everything's fine.
You know, I have to say there is a bit of a misunderstanding because I saw the president's tweet the other day saying, you know, what's going on in Israel? Netanyahu won the election. Why does he have to go through the whole process again? But what people here don't get, and I think the president maybe was unaware, is that the Israel political system is different. We do not have an election with defined results. Netanyahu did not win because he managed to get, good number of seats equal to the other party, but in order to be confirmed as a winner, you have to form a coalition. And in order to do that, you have to give and take, you have to make compromise. This is what Israel is built on compromise. And he was not able to get that job done. So, the conclusion as of now that he did not win the election, and then we'll have to wait a couple of more months, but I agree with Irit that the check and balances are working. And I do not think that Israel is going into a Din Torah or Halacha state. It's far-fetched. It's just a discourse that we entered yesterday, a discourse of election, which is, hateful, with a lot of
Yes,
spite.
but there is a
It's
discussion,
not real.
Talib, there is a discussion about the Supreme Court and what's going to happen, and the rights of minorities and the Arabs and many things surrounding that. It's a big issue in Israel.
Well, Israel's judiciary system is under threat, that's for sure.
No, it's not for sure.
Well, it's under threat from at least with the discourse, the way people talk about it. They manage to, they start to defame judges and so on. It's not going in a good direction.
Well, the head of the Supreme Court, the Israeli Supreme Court, went to Nuremberg to some convention and said that the problem with the rise of the Nazis was that the court was a weak court. Come on, this is a historic, there is in every democracy an ongoing debate about the power structures and the relationship between the legislature and the executive branch. It's part of a healthy democracy. I kind of like the tension between, yes, it's a good thing, these are the checks and balances. It's nice.
Attila, but still here in America, here in the US, they have constitution. We don't have as such infrastructure.
I'm listening to Irit, and you must be a conservative in order to be able to not face reality. And as for a fact, the institutions of the State of Israel are under attack in the past 4 or 5 years by the politicians who are looking to strengthen themselves and weaken
I would say
all
the
others.
politicians are under attack from the Supreme Court, but you
Good
know,
for them.
reality is in the eyes of the beholder.
Irit, you are a journalist. This is our job,
I am not a
to
journalist.
attack politicians and to bark as strong as we can, not to applaud them. I'm sorry. This is not what we are doing in a democracy. We are standing behind the politicians and we are chasing them down. This is what we do.
So stop
It's
on
not
that.
over dramatic at all.
Stop on that.
His name is Attila.
His name, yeah.
It is.
Be cautious, Attila, at the end. You have to be.
What did you expect? Yes.
You know how it ends. Attila.
And it's not personal, of course.
We all meet in Israel at the end of the day.
Right?
Let's talk about the deal of the century. Let's talk about the US and Israel. Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen soon? Because the elections are rehappening. So when are we talking about if?
This, me?
Yeah, go ahead.
The schedule is unclear, to my opinion, and I think the Americans they took the step in order to promote things, but on the grounds is not really ripe for that. If you look at the Palestinian side, there's no one to talk to on the other side, really. That's the sad thing to say, but he's not only a weak leader, but he's also very sick. So even if there was a political will on the Palestinian side, there is no one to talk to because of his situation. Having said that, on the Israeli side, zero political will to do anything. It's all about, I'm not talking about Irit, of course, it's all about conservatism as it is. It's just not changing anything. And therefore, there's no way, even the American administration, that's my opinion, will really
Sorry for taking the moderator right, but being a defense analyst for... Go ahead.
Just one more little thing. There is the third side, that's the American system, and to my opinion, I'm not sure, even though I've met them and they're very willing. If you talk about Greenblatt, you can see his desire and his passion, but I'm not sure that they have the right backing and the right international forum or international, stamina, maybe you can call it like that, or incompetence to do things like that, huge things.
So I'll take the moderator right here just for a second. Being the defense analyst and knowing the Palestinians quite well, I think there's always someone to talk to. And the fact that the Israeli government refrains from doing so for such a long time is just out of stagnation and not trying to do things that should have been done and talks that should have taken place. And the current administration, and you saw the poll that these people were involved in, is currently playing the Israeli game and not the bilateral game.
And not the Palestinian game?
The Israeli
no,
side
the bilateral game. There are two sides to that
the Israeli
issue.
side is
we play our own
game. They really want the Palestinian to say no. That's the the big game. That's it.
Can I offer another division, because Attila is all
He's waiting for you
hot
to
about the conservatives and liberals.
End.
So I'll offer another two category division. People who believe in solutions and people who say, well, let's try this, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, so let's try something else. I do not think that the Palestinian-Israeli problem can be solved in terms of solutions. And we've tried agreements, I believe. Now, I'm not so sure about it as Attila does in everything, but boy, look at the look in his eyes.
Irit.
But I do believe that some modesty and some respect to, I think that maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I don't think that many people would have guessed that the solution to the Palestinian problem is going to depend on the Sunni and Shiite relationship and wars in the Middle East. I'm talking about the sorts of relationships between Arab states that several decades ago we never dreamed we're going to be in relation with, because other forces that not directly are connected with the Israelis and the Palestinians. So I don't like solutions very much.
Take it from here.
I like the process.
I want to calm you down, Irit. You are my beloved
Look
friend.
how
I want to
calm
calm you
I
down.
am.
You can get out of the shelter. The danger of peace has passed.
There is no danger of peace.
There is no danger
Everything's
of peace,
fine, Attila.
of a peace process,
Inhale.
of a peace agreement in the next years. You can calm down and go destroy the High Court, the Supreme Court. Deal with the internal problems. The peace is not coming. You asked about the plan of the President of the United States, the plan of the century. So they are working on it very hard. But there is a consensus in Israel there is a consensus, and we have to say that a peace plan cannot take us to a peace agreement in the next few years. Even those on the left, those people who thought that maybe the Palestinians will be able to sign an agreement are not there now.
But it has to be handled. There are 2 million people living in Gaza, 3 million in the West Bank. They will not go anywhere.
I know, but they are not ready. And we are not ready. We have to face that. In the past, I used to be where perhaps most of the leftists were. And I'm not there anymore because I face reality. I'm not a conservative.
So the big question is, will Israel annex? I think, we passed through that two-state solution. It's all about annexing.
So
I'm not sure about it.
Since we have quite a short time left, and since at the end of the day, when I'm being asked in Israel, what's the biggest threat to Israel, and everybody expects me to say Iran and Palestinian and Hezbollah, etc., and I always say us, the Israelis.
No.
And that's true. We can ruin ourselves like that. I want to ask you, is President Trump a good president for Israel or not?
Definitely yes. And us being journalists and facing and knowing much more than the public, we have to tell this to the public and face reality. President Trump is strengthening Israel by what he's doing, but what he's saying, yeah, you may applaud him. Because by doing that, Israel is much stronger in the Middle East than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm giving a mixed answer because I think on some issues it's been great. I really loved the Jerusalem embassy move. I thought it was really enhancing and important for Israel's, everything. It was just, a great move. But on other fronts, I think we will be wiser with history. It's too soon to tell, and some of the processes are risky. The way it goes with the deal of the century.
But Tal, on the real politic,
maybe
he's good to it for Israel. This is the truth.
Well,
yes, but there is the bipartisan issue, etc., that we're dealing
Netanyahu
with.
Did it,
I do not like the way, and I can give another specific. I do not like the way that Netanyahu is following his steps in bashing Obama and so on. I don't like it. I think it's not good for Israel to do that, to bash Obama or to bash other leader, to not talk to Romney or so, just on behalf of the president's will. It's not good.
So, Irit, let's take it one step forward.
I'm caught in a trap, like Elvis Presley sang. On the one hand, I think it's rudeness and very impolite to say something bad about a leader of the country that you're a visitor in. And here I'm afraid to say a kind word about President Trump, because this is a room full of Democrats. I think he's a great friend for Israel. And I appreciate his relationship with Israel a lot and his commitment to Israel. And yes,
So I'll ask you, and please be short on that, and talking about the Jewish issue in America, us Israelis vis-a-vis that issue, which changes, and there is a lot of tension. Obviously, we've all covered that from different angles. It's something that's on the table. There is a new government. Is it going to be a better or worse?
Well, there isn't a new government, and we're waiting for the new government to be formed maybe in November, and then we'll know if this is an ultra-Orthodox government, then we are heading towards the same problem as we had right now, and you must understand that the religious Zionism, as it is in the current Knesset, is a little bit more Orthodox than the most of the religious Zionists. So it's about probably 22 seats of ultra-Orthodox people in this Knesset, and I think per the Kotel and other issues, we're heading in a more diverse, but if election will turn differently, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. You were asking about the Jewish issue. Yes. Well, since I don't have enough time, then I'll put the bomb and run away. I think there is a great problem with the Democratic Party that which most of the Jews in America support. And I could feel the tension in some panels I listened here. And I do not know. I do not know, folks. The Democratic Party is radicalizing, and I think it's not very kind for the Jewish population in the United States and the state of Israel. I think there's a problem.
Unfortunately, most of the governments in Israel in the past 10, 15 years have failed vis-a-vis the Jews in America. Failed. That's an F. Because for so many years, the Orthodoxy in Israel is controlling totally what religion means in Israel. And that's a failure. In this room are sitting conservative Jews and Reform Jews, and they do not have a place around the table of religion in Israel. This is a shame. This is a shame. It's not Democrats or Republicans. It's you, American Jews, feeling at home in Israel. This is the real issue, and we have to deal with it.
It's us Jews being citizens in Israel, a different country of
It's not a matter of citizenship.
Do not lecture us on behalf of the Jews of America.
It's a matter of bonding between Israel and American Jewry. And all the governments in the past 20 years have failed
is running for president of something I don't quite know what.
This is the truth. This is a shameful thing.
This is not the truth.
I have to calm things up. So as I started with the story, I'll end up with a storytelling of a bank stands on Fifth Avenue in New York. Let's call it one of the American biggest bank, Chase Manhattan Bank. And they have their own skyscraper. And on the roof, they had a red neon light saying, "You have got a friend in Chase Manhattan Bank." Came over one of the Israeli banks. Which one do you prefer? Bank Leumi. They've opened their branch opposite. I wouldn't do it to you, Matthew. They've opened their bank oppositing Chase Manhattan's bank. And look at their sign and said, "We approach the Jewish community of New York." So they put a red neon sign on their roof saying, "You have got a mishpuche in Bank Leumi." The people of Chase Manhattan Bank saw it and they changed their sign and wrote, "If you have got a mishpuche in Bank Leumi, you really need a friend in Chase Manhattan Bank." Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
That concludes our morning plenary. Please refer to the back of your name badge for your AJC concurrent session location and make your way there now.